All right, if you are a leader in an organization, an inspiring leader, somebody who runs teams or is responsible for the talent, the development within your organization, you are going to want to tune in and really listen to today's episode because we are talking about closing the leadership skills gap, and I'm going to be dropping some truth bombs for you here. So first of all, a lot of this is actually what I recently shared. I was out in Alaska, and I was out in Alaska. I actually feel like I should do a whole episode on just our experience in Alaska. I shared a little bit on a recent episode where I talked about something that Sawyer said that I was like, wow, it just reminded me of we can focus on the journey and not just the results. So go check out that episode that I recently did a couple weeks ago. But I was out in Alaska speaking for the Northwest Human Resource Management Association at their conference and was so excited to be there, was able to attend some other amazing sessions that I'll hopefully be able to share a couple insights with you as well. And the session that I was leading was on closing the leadership skills gap, building a resilient workforce. And this is something that I'm so passionate about talking about right now. It's something that we are working on with our clients a lot, whether those are executive coaching clients, when we're brought in to help create leadership development programs, when I'm speaking to organizations, when we're doing strategic partnership to help them. This is something I'm so passionate about right now. So I'm really excited. So again, if you are somebody who is in charge of, even metrics within your organization, talent, all of that, this is absolutely for you. So a couple things is, why is this so relevant right now? And this was one of the reasons that I really brought this to, and this is actually also something, a side note, that we're talking about on our executive forum. Actually, when I'm recording this, our executive forum is happening today. So I'm going to be sharing a full summary of, what were the biggest takeaways from this event? What are some of the biggest things that HR leaders, that talent leaders, that organizational leaders are thinking about right now? But go ahead and you can send me an email at julie@julieminden.com and I can send you the recap from our executive forum. And if you are currently an executive level leader within an organization, I would love to invite you to our executive forums. We'll put a link in the show notes and you can register to get notified for our executive forums. We host these about every month or so, where we bring together executive level leaders and organizations to talk about really key organizational topics, from retention, engagement, what does AI look like right now in terms of things like how to create cultures of development. And I'll share key insights, but we also bring together leaders from different industries to talk about these topics. So we would love to invite you and have you join us for those executive forums. We've had people make some really great connections with each other, meet up for coffee, do some virtual Zoom chats after these. So it's a great place to connect and grow your own network of other leaders as well. So we're going to be talking about that in our forum this month. And like I said, you can sign up for our next executive forum if you're a fit for that. So a little bit, I'm just going to kind of share some of the highlight reel of what we talked about in this session. And really, the whole goal, and one of the things that we're doing as a leadership development firm, is trying to get even more hyper focused ourselves, but also helping our clients to really think like of the macro big picture. We can get so in the day to day and kind of just get caught up in doing what we've always done and forget to really like zoom out and look at what is the impact. And I know, as somebody who's worked in the talent development space for many years, one of the most challenging things, especially when I was working within an organization, is how do we show ROI? Sure, it feels good to say that we develop our people, or people say they want to get developed and we're like, okay, we're going to give them these opportunities. And we know that people want it, but it can be very hard to create a business case. So one of my sort of tasks that I've been taking on is, every time that I'm talking to people or with our clients, especially if they're the ones that are going to be influencing this decision within the organization, is to help give you the tools that you need to be successful to create the influence and the impact that you want in your organization, by tying the development, by tying the talent initiatives with business goals. How is it directly tied to the strategic plan of the organization, of where they want to go? How is it hitting the mark or filling the gaps for what you might currently be experiencing? And how do we put metrics to that? The more that you can do that, the more buy-in that you're going to get And it's no longer a nice to have, it's a must, it's a need, it's a necessity for the business to thrive, especially given where we're going as organizations. We need our talent, we need our people to be resilient and agile and adaptable. They need to be able to pivot, all these words that I know we don't love, but are so true when you think about them. We need them to be able to open and adapt to the new technology, to learning AI, to going one direction and then the next week needing to go another direction, to being able to work different, to think different, to connect with people differently. That's what we need from our people. And if we don't, we see the business impact. So a couple of the key things that I shared that I want to highlight for you is why this is so important right now, why this matters right now, is because, and one of the things I asked at this event was, what is one of the biggest skills gaps you're seeing in your organization right now? And we were seeing things around like the managers. I heard a lot about the managers is people are high, and I hear this all the time when I'm talking to organizations. People are getting promoted into manager positions based on high performance, not based on leadership potential. We know, if you've heard me talk, potential is a huge thing. I did a whole episode on performance versus potential. People are getting promoted based on high performance, not on leadership potential. And so there is this huge gap. And I heard this when I asked the leaders, and these were leaders from, all different types of organizations, that the managers don't know how to manage. They don't know how to lead. And so there's just really big gap when it comes to our manager level leaders. Also, when we look at the size of the business problem, I love to bring in stats so that you can actually again use this as in your toolkit to help you make your business case when it comes to having these conversations within your organization. And so there was a workplace learning report that showed that 88% of organizations are concerned about retention. 88%. And what is their number one strategy to address that? It's providing learning opportunities, but not just any learning opportunities. People want specific, they want targeted development opportunities. Another stat of why this is so important right now is Gallup did a study on the engagement that's going down. And this is something that I'm talking to a lot of clients about as well, is seeing their engagement scores drop and the impact that is having on things like, for one organization, their C-suite bonuses are tied to engagement scores. But also when we know engagement goes down, we know that productivity goes down, we know innovation goes down, right? And so Gallup did a study and found that in 2024, engagement went down by 2%, which might not seem like a lot, but that was actually $438 billion in lost productivity due to that decrease. Also, stats around things like the financial impact. 70% of executives are seeing a financial impact to their organization due to their workforce lacking the right competencies. Again, this is how we're tying it directly to the metrics. Also, when we look at turnover costs, this is something that we talk to organizations about a lot as well, is it can be anywhere from 50 to 200% of the cost to replace, of the salary to replace somebody. And so if you are replacing a lot of talent because they're leaving because we're not providing the right opportunities for them, that is costing a lot. And we can tie specific numbers to that. You can calculate out the metrics for that. Also, another statistic was 44% of stressed leaders are considering leaving and 26% to plan to exit this year. If these are key players within your organization, that is huge. That's a huge impact. So one of the things that we talked about at this, that I shared at this HR conference was how can you think about this from the perspective of your organization? And so we actually ran some numbers. If you were to look at an 1,000 employee company, so there's 1,000 employees at your company, and assume a $75,000 fully loaded per employee cost. So what we mean by that, let's just say that their base salary is a certain amount. So their base salary plus benefits plus any other perks or allowances that you might give them, we'll just assume it's a $75,000 loaded per year employee. If we take that stat of the global engagement declining, right? I said 2% went down in what the lost productivity. If you look at that for an 1,000 employee company, if you had a 2% drop in engagement, that could be $1.5 million lost annually. If we look at the cost to replace employees, so I said the average was between 50 and 200%. Let's just say that we look at kind of in the middle, 100%. Let's just say it costs 100% to replace an employee. At an 1,000 employee company, if you have 10% leave with 100% salary replacement, that could be $7.5 million walking out the door. We can do this same thing when it comes to the skills gap and the revenue loss and all of that. So one of the things that I challenge these HR leaders with, and that I'll challenge you with, especially if you're somebody in this type of role, is how can you be looking at those metrics for yourself? And one of the things that we do is that we are that strategic partner for our clients to help them to think about these things. If they engage us and say, hey, we want some development for our managers, we need some development for our directors, we have somebody, our question will be like, what's the impact, the financial impact right now? What's the ROI? What are you looking for results? And we'll help try and tie those metrics to that. One of the organizations that we were brought in, and we were talking about doing some type of director development, we started to run the numbers and say, okay, how many open positions have you had? What's the average salary? Or we can kind of estimate out what the average salary would be. How long is the position open? And we can see, okay, this problem is costing you this much. What if we could put, this big of a dent in that problem, right? Or even for one organization that we partnered with, we were able to tie. It was so amazing. We were working with an executive, a high-level executive team for a healthcare organization, and we were looking at some of their time and how much time they were spending in meetings, and we were actually able to help figure out how much was it costing them to have these leaders in, let's just say, an extra hour or two of meetings. What was that sort of lost meetings that didn't need to be happening, right? Because there was a lack of delegation, there was a lack of time management, there was a lack of prioritization. And so what was that costing them? And then on the flip side, we were able to calculate, because this was more of a revenue generating type department, what were they expected to be bringing in, quote unquote? Like, what were they kind of expected for their executive team to be bringing in or be responsible for? And if these leaders were able to free up an hour or two of time to now do revenue generating activities, what could that impact be? And really, it could be millions potentially for this particular situation. And so you can really start to look at that. So that's one of my challenges for you, and to just think about, how are you tying this? And to even just look at the ROI then, because there's research out there that there can be a $7 return for every $1 spent on leadership training. So again, if we look at an 1,000 employee company, if they were investing $500,000 into targeted development, that could be $3.5 million in returns, productivity, retention, innovation. And so when people will say like, well, we don't have the budget to do this or things like that, I'm like, you don't have the ability not to do it, especially if you're the one who's seen issues with retention, with engagement, with lack of innovation, with productivity issues, right? And so really why this matters right now. And also we talked a little bit about where this goes wrong. So I say is, having this kind of insider scoop to talking to organizations, not only our clients, but obviously we host these executive forums. I'm going and talking to leaders of different organizations all the time, just kind of getting a pulse on where things are going. Many organizations are trying to solve this the wrong way. They're putting the ladder against the wrong wall. They're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. It's one-off leadership training events that don't have any specific tie to organizational goals. There's the promoting high performers without the skills development. There's those generic check the box training programs where we're just doing it because we've always done it that way, right? And those I call those like failing tactics. That could be a huge loss. And despite the spend that there's $166 billion spent annually in the US on leadership development. And despite that spend, 65% of executives still say that their leadership pipeline is underprepared for the future. And so where is that gap, right? And again, a lot of the times they're not working because they're not strategically aligned. There's no ongoing reinforcement. There's no personalization. It's not being measured for ROI. So now is the time to really be focusing on this. And what do you need to be doing going into the end of the year and thinking about your development and going into 2026 to set yourself up for success? Because if nothing changes, right? If we don't change the approach, then, leadership turnover is going to continue to cost millions annually in replacement and lost productivity. Innovation is going to stall. Engagement and retention is going to decline. You're going to have market share erosion if leaders aren't prepared. And so we talked about the strategy. So I'm just going to go high level over a couple of the strategies real quick that I shared with these leaders on things that they could think about. First of all, it's a mindset shift of we need to go from transactional to transformational, right? Most leadership development is very transactional. It just dumps information on leaders and they hope that it sticks. But we really need to shift that, especially given where the workforce wants to go and where we need to go to really future-proof our workforce, is we need to shift that into this transformational approach that is embedding conscious leadership practices into the everyday, how leaders are thinking, how they're deciding, how they're acting, and one-off programs aren't going to cut it. And so what we need to do is we need to diagnose the real gaps. We need to build the programs that have this future-focused mindset. We need to equip leaders with the right habits, and we need to measure the ROI and start really pushing ourselves to tie that to the organizational things. And when we do that, those are the organizations that can retain top talent, that can attract new talent, that accelerate their performance. Those are the ones that are going to really stand out in their market. And so the first strategy is diagnosing the leadership gaps. And here is a huge one. And we talked about this. We had some open dialogue in my session at that HR conference. And some people were like, we're just starting to do this. We want to do this, but we haven't really done it very well yet. The thing is, you can't close a gap that you can't see. So if you don't know what's going on and where the misses are within your leaders or within the employees, within the talent that you have, then you are not going to know how to fix it, right? You're not going to know how to invest in the right areas. And 2025 McKinsey study showed that targeted development is 2.4 times more likely to see business performance improvement. So we need to start actually assessing, and that can be as simple or as elaborate as you want. It's doing leadership capabilities audit. It might be doing some 360 feedback, insights interviews. One of the things that we do, we partner with our clients, particularly if we're going to be creating programs like this and partnering with them, is we will do some insights interviews, get some 360 feedback to figure out first, what is it that we're trying. They might be telling us, the organization, we might be talking to one department. They're like, hey, we think we need this. But until we actually have those conversations, we might not really know. So we will host some insights interviews. We'll talk to different leaders, all of the key players, to really figure out, maybe even sometimes some assessments, to really figure out what's going on, to make sure that we are creating the right solution for the right problem. And if you have leadership competencies in your organization, even tying those gaps to those competencies, that's a big thing. And making sure that that's a big part of it. The second strategy that we talked about for closing the gap is developing future-ready leaders and really needing to know, what do we need from our leaders? We even talked about from a large scale, there was the World Economic Forum did a study about some of the core skills that people identified that they're going to need in the future. It was things like analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility and agility, leadership and social influence, creative thinking, motivation and self-awareness were some of the ones that were in the top 50 to about 70%. But also you need to look at within your organization, what are those skills that we really need given where we want to be going in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and making sure that those are the things that are on your priority for development. And then the third strategy was cultivating that development-focused culture. So again, how do we go from just sending people to a training or having just coaching, and how do we make sure that we have a culture where that thrives? We actually had a whole executive forum where we brought some leaders in, a chief people officer and a director of talent development, to talk about how do they really create these cultures of development. And it's making sure that you embed this into the everyday environment that you have and creating this pipeline of capable leaders. There was a Gallup study done in 2025 here, their workplace learning report, that shows that companies with a strong learning culture have a 30 to 50% higher employee engagement and 92% more likely to innovate year over year. It's huge to have this embedded into your culture. And so how can you make sure that it's part of your organizational values? How are you integrating it into the learning goals and performance reviews? Sometimes when we're talking to leaders and they say, well, my people aren't developing their teams, or they're not delegating, they're not doing this. Like, is that part of their performance? Until it becomes part of kind of like this muscle. It's like this muscle that they need to be flexing. So is it part of their performance? Do they know what they're expected to do? And the last thing I want to highlight is just some of the common objections, because we hear these all the time, right? And again, I want to tool you up with what you can say if you're trying to integrate this into your company. So the first objection we hear is like, we're already doing leadership development. Awesome. That is better than not doing it, right? But there was a McKinsey study that showed that only 29% of companies are linking their leadership development to a specific strategy. And those that don't are 3 times less likely to see measurable business results. So my question is, amazing that you're doing business development. Is it the right stuff? It's not about doing more training. It's about doing targeted diagnostic and business aligned development that's going to be tied to that ROI. The other objection is we don't have time for this. Our leaders are too busy. The cost of not acting is far greater. Gallup estimated that poor leadership and disengagement is costing U.S. businesses 1.9 trillion annually. So they tied the poor leadership with the disengagement. And so again, it's really about how can you integrate this into the flow of work, and really the idea that you can't afford not to. We can't afford not to be doing this. And then the third objection we hear a lot is we don't have the budget for this, right? We don't have the budget to do this. Companies with a strong leadership pipeline are 2.3 times more likely to outperform their peers financially. 2.3 times. So we need to shift the focus from thinking of this as an expense to thinking of this as a profit driver. What will be possible for you when you focus on supporting your leaders and supporting your development? So those were some of the key things. I know that was a lot. Hopefully that was helpful. That was kind of the highlight reel of what we talked about. Again, send me a message. I would love to share with you more insights and what your biggest takeaway was. But one of the things I will say for you is closing the leadership skills gap is so important right now, and working on building that resilient workforce. One of the things that we do with organizations is we have an assessment called the Energy Leadership Assessment. And this actually is one of the things that looks at resilience. It looks at how are people showing up when things are going well, and how are they showing up under stress, so that we can help to build that resilience, and we can use that information to help them to grow and be able to handle what's coming up for them. So if you're somebody who's listening, first of all, I hope this was helpful for you. Get some nuggets and some tools in your toolbox to help create influence in your organization. And of course, if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, this is a big initiative for us right now, please send me a message, julie@juliemenden.com. Reach out to me. Would love to talk to you. I can share with you a little bit about our core capabilities at my leadership development firm, and just so that you have us in your back pocket if you ever were to have a need. So remember to get out there and work on developing your leaders so that your organizations can be engaging, retaining the right talent, profitable, and ready for the future of work.